the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, USA Today's NFL Wire site that covers, of course, your Arizona Cardinals. And joining me is my co-host from SB Nation's Revenge of the Birds, their Arizona Cardinals site, Seth Cox, as we have episode 785. Not a whole lot of, but we've got a little bit to talk about. We've got a little bit to talk about. We could talk more about Jacoby Brissett and his contract situation. Is Matthew Stafford got a contract extension, and I wrote a piece about comparing the salaries of the NFC West quarterbacks and the starters, and the fact that, and we did misquote one fact in our last show when we were talking about Jacoby, and that was about the Aaron Rodgers number with his new contract with the Steelers. That $15 million number was based on the unrestricted free agent tag. He since signed a deal that's going to pay him $22+ million. The lowest average salary of any starting quarterback, expected starting quarterback who is not on a rookie deal, is at $22 million, and Jacoby with a pittance of 4.9.
Technically, Geno Smith's at 3.3 million. So, I mean, it could always be
and
worse.
Kyler is, but if we're looking at what they're being paid this year, because he's getting all of his cash so he's at over 20 million in cash this year. Kyler's over 35 million in cash this year. And so,
right. And so, but the base salary for those guys. And that's what's interesting about the whole situation is it's like, pay him what he's worth. And you're like, what is he worth? And for how long? And how many games? And those are all relevant questions to the topic. And we explored that last episode. So, no need to overly rehash it, but it's still in the news. It's still the reality of the situation. Somebody on my site brought up, he'll definitely be at OTAs with the bad back, unfortunately, right? He's having back injuries because he's not going to practice during this hold-out, hold-in thing. It is interesting to see how the fan base is still split. I mean, there are fans, he deserves it. And it's like, deserves it based on what? That he's the potential incumbent starter, that the Cardinals themselves have not actually said he's the starter, right? Like, the Cardinals themselves have not come out and said Jacoby Brissett is our quarterback one. So there is this reality, just that maybe Jacoby, that's part of what he's looking for or wants, right? Like, hey, I want the title and I want to be compensated like quarterback one. And to that, you and I have said, sure. I mean, $15 million seems reasonable for what's happening. The question that you and I have asked is but the reality is there's low expectations. And if you go 0-6 or 1-8, are you going to give some of that money back because you're not going to start the whole season? And the answer is and should be what? No. Right?
No.
And so the Cardinals playing similar-ish hardball for a guy that they don't expect to start all 17 games, even though they'll never come out and say that, right? It's reasonable.
Yes, but this show is not about Jacoby Brissett, even though the latest report says that the Cardinals and Brissett are significantly apart, which makes sense. Jacoby's probably looking for $22+ million this year. The Cardinals will probably want to pay him $10 million. That's what I guess it would be, but we want to talk about Josh Sweat. He has not been at OTAs. OTAs, their second week of OTAs began today on Tuesday, and I don't believe that there was open practice for the media to see. But last week, Josh Sweat was not in attendance, a notable absence considering A couple of things. One, he's one of their best and most important defensive players. Two, we heard that when Jonathan Gannon was fired, that Sweat requested to be traded. Now, I don't know what has happened since then, but that he was unhappy about his guy, Jonathan Gannon, being let go. Now, Nick Morales is still around, and there was the report that came from John Gambadoro that he doesn't. It's not injury related, so you are left to believe what that says between the lines, and that is one: either he's just not doing voluntary work, or there is an issue, and so that's just out there in the ether. And what we want to talk about first is the level of concern, and my level of concern right now is very low, because Sweat didn't do a lot of work in OTAs last year. I believe he does have a workout bonus of $100,000. So if he wants that $100,000, he does need to attend and participate in a certain percentage, and it depends on the contract, a certain percentage of the voluntary part of the offseason. But if he doesn't care about the 100K, one, then he doesn't need be there for the voluntary part. Or if he's simply not appearing, not showing up on the days where there's reporters there, that's also a possibility too.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about this a little bit, right? Like, he didn't show up even when Jonathan Gannon was the head coach, and he's a Jonathan Gannon guy, allegedly. We know he does like playing for Gannon. Two of his best years as pros have been with Jonathan Gannon as either the head coach or defensive coordinator. There's not going to be a whole lot of changeover from the defensive calls. Maybe schemes, the way they deploy things will be different. But defensive calls probably won't change much. With Nick Morales still at the helm, obviously being retained because he's a bright young mind and not because no other defense coordinator wanted the job. You look at that and it is low. There are some concerning things, and I think the most concerning, and you and I have kind of breezed over this, is that he was, ideally a Jonathan Gannon disciple and a guy that allegedly came here because of Jonathan Gannon. There's also the reality that he came here thinking that they were competing. And the way that they have gone about things this offseason kind of tells you the opposite from that perspective, right?
Yeah. That is true. Last year, we had expectations for this team. We believed that they were going to take the next step, and then things kind of fell apart. Sweat did, for the most part, his part. But between losing the head coach he enjoyed playing for, and it's you wonder if there is more than just the initial trade request. Now, some people have said it didn't happen. There are some people who have claimed that Sweat did not request a trade. Now, that might have been just an initial, a reaction to Gannon being fired, to going, get me out of here, and does not address anything since then, because what we were told and what we heard is that soon after the Gannon firing is when Sweat made that request, and it has since not been confirmed or forwarded or added to by any national or even local reports. So we can assume probably that it was almost a knee-jerk reaction, or that it wasn't too serious or too concerning. But adding that up to, hey, you've got a brand new head coach. I'm sure for Mike LaFleur, there is some level of concern. Sweat is one of the most important pieces of that defense. And while the defense is the same, the coaching is mostly the same, and on the defensive side of the ball, you're, as a new head coach, you would love your veteran performers to also be leaders and to be part of the offseason program to show that. And as Cardinals fans have shown previously, that they feel that players, veteran players who have important roles, whether it's a quarterback or a quarterback who's not here anymore, should be in those voluntary parts of the offseason. The question is, and the part we don't know, is how much has he missed? Has he been there with the classroom work? Has he been there for strength and conditioning? Was he simply not there on the first day of OTAs or the first 2 days of OTAs that reporters were able to observe? Or is there something going on behind the scenes of unhappiness?
Yeah, and that's the hard part, right? And a lot of this stems from the report that came out today about, we're recording on a Tuesday, at about 2:30 in the afternoon. Thank God for summer break, right? That Jordan Schultz, I would say a good, respected NFL insider. Would you not?
Yeah, he's when it comes to reporting, he's solid. Now, when it comes to rumors, I don't know about that, but when he's saying that there have been trade calls, you can make the assumption that he's not lying. There have been trade calls.
Right, and that's the thing, is like, that doesn't mean the Cardinals are even listening, right? Like, there's a reality that they don't even care about the trade calls. But it does speak a little bit to the level of dysfunction, but also the level of overall thought about where the Cardinals are and who the Cardinals are right now. And one of the things that you look at with this is a lot of people are looking at, maybe not homegrown talent, and that's going to start up probably closer to the season or definitely during the season, of veterans like Buda Baker and those guys about, hey, let's start prognosticating that we're going to or speculating, right, that, oh, maybe Buda Baker's going to be on the move. Okay, maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be on the move. Like, they'll start doing stuff like that. And it starts from kind of the, I don't know, how would you describe Sweat? Like, he's not, like you said, it doesn't seem like he's disgruntled unless he's told people he is. But he fits the bill of, like, not really a Cardinals guy, right? Like, he signed a 3-year contract. It's really easy to get rid of him, move on from him without any issues. So why not just make the move, right? Why not just get rid of him in that way? And that's who they start with, right? They don't go immediately go, oh, the Cardinals should trade Trey McBride, right? Like, that's not how, that's not how it starts. But it starts with guys like Josh Sweat, and then it's going to go to the next guy that we'll hear a lot about is probably Buda Baker, because an older, aging veteran on the tail end of his career and on the final years of his contract. And then it'll be an interesting one where you'll be like, oh, do you trade a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr.? And again, not saying it's happening. Jess and I cannot emphasize that enough, right? We're not saying it's happening. What we're saying is that's the way that these things work. And again, we know for a fact that they've taken calls on a number of different players over the years. And it doesn't even mean that they were interested at all in trading them. It just means that they took the calls on them.
Yeah,
right?
Someone else called and said, hey, what about Larry Fitzgerald? Right? What about they simply they did their job in answering the phone. so that's the thing to remember about reports of trade calls. It is one thing to take a trade call. It is another one to engage in trade talks. Words matter in this case. So if the Cardinals are fielding trade calls, it means some other general manager is calling Monty Ossenfort. If Monty Ossenfort engages in trade talks with said general managers or is initiating phone calls by calling up another GM, call up Nick Caserio and saying, how interested are you in a pass rusher? That's a different story. But let's dive a little bit more into this. Coming next on the Rise of Seared podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's talk about whether or not the Cardinals should or will trade Josh Sweat. That's coming next on Rise of Seared. We're back on the Rise Up Seared podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web, talking about Josh Sweat, his absence from OTAs, and whether or not the Cardinals should or will trade Josh Sweat, their leading sack guy from a season ago. 12 sacks, career high, 20 total tackles, 4 forced fumbles, 30 total tackles, 4 forced fumbles, 17 quarterback hits, a productive pass rusher, but also wasn't exactly a difference maker, and especially late in games, as I think he logged in the fourth quarter a single tackle assist in the fourth quarter of any game. That said, one, Seth, will the Cardinals trade Josh Sweat? And two, should they trade Josh Sweat if he's unhappy?
I mean, if he's unhappy, absolutely. There's no reason. Like, they're not close enough in his contract that it's really, worth it, right? It'd be different if they were, and it was a 4-year deal. I apologize for getting that wrong, but they're theoretically, out after next year, in terms of the contract. The dead money drops off significantly. The contract savings, really changes things up. And so all of that, to me, he's going to be 31 by the end of the contract. There was always a reality, right, Jess, that they realistically, and by the way, they can get out after this year. I apologize. They can get out after this year and only, take on $16.5 million of dead cap, which would be a savings of like $23.5 million on what he's owed. So like that's the thing, is like you're talking about overpaying slightly for 31-year-old Josh Sweat so you can get underpaid, highly productive 28-year-old Josh Sweat, right? Like that's where you're at. And he's probably looking at it the same way. He's looking at this going, golly, I really don't want to be on the Cardinals for the next 3 years, because by the time he's ramping down at 31, maybe, and we're hopeful, but maybe they're going to be good, right? Year 3 of the Mike LaFleur era. And so that's a really difficult thing. Now, if he's content and not a distraction or a cancer in the locker room, I don't think that there's anything wrong with holding on to him, because he is your most productive and really realistically only pass rushing option for this team. But after next year, you have that out where you're going to save quite a bit of money. So if you accelerate that, because a team would ideally be willing to take on his cap hit, right? Like that's how you would have to look at that, is, okay, are you going to absorb his cap hit so we're not taking that on later on, right? Those things all matter. I just look at this, Jess, and I just think this is off-season fodder of the haves and the have-nots, right? And you have a team that's in the Arizona Cardinals that's projected to be miserable this year. Whether fans like it or not, they're projected to be miserable. And they have good players. but it would be career suicide to trade Trey McBride, right? Unless he just completely goes off the deep end and holds out and says, I'm not playing for the Cardinals. I mean, that's career suicide for Monty. A guy like Sweat, he's not a homegrown guy. He's in kind of the twilight of his career. He's due really big money at his age 30 and 31 seasons. Like, it could make sense that he's a mid-season 0-8, 1-10 type of trade guy, right?
Yeah. The one thing, if the Cardinals look like they're trying to lose this year. It looks like they're trying to tank, but they keep some sort of level of, hey, we're doing competent things, so they're adding depth here. If they go and trade Josh Sweat when they did exactly zero for the defensive edge this offseason, I don't know how you can convince anyone that they're doing anything other than trying to be bad. Or just trying to give young players all the opportunities, to get Jordan Birch all the snaps and just, see what value Baron Browning is. Because they've added nobody in free agency. They didn't draft anyone. They've done nothing to the defensive edge. And if they get rid of the only productive player, honestly, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they're going to trade him, and I don't think that they should. I don't think that they should this year.
Like I said, if they are legitimately, again, 0-10, who cares at that point, right? Because again, like, you're so bad at that point, you can't even have a winning season. You would have to miraculously win 7 games in a row to even, 7-10, make it look somewhat palatable. But if you're 0-10 with Josh Sweat, you can't get worse than 0-10 without him, right? Like, yeah, maybe the defense is slightly worse. Maybe you don't have an, early game pass rush sack artist because teams are going to run the ball 42 times a game later in the game. But maybe you can get, a third round pick in the 2027 NFL draft and start loading up on draft capital and draft picks to start to rebuild this roster. And so those are the things that you, but like this offseason, unless he's just completely cantankerous and like making it so it is hard for a new head coach, making it hard for a questionable defensive coordinator, right? Like, that you can't have because you already have enough issues. You can't have your quote unquote best player being disgruntled and inflammatory from within, right?
Yeah. Cap wise, it wouldn't be great.
Not this year. No,
not this year. If they trade him,
miserable idea.
If they trade him after June 1st, now his salary is fully guaranteed, but they paid him already almost $7.25 million option bonus back in March that they have. So they got the $3.7 million in signing bonus from last year, and then a 1.8 proration per year. So they would, if they traded him after June 1st, they would have about $5.5 million in dead money and save almost $11 million, but they would take on about $16.5 million of dead money next year is how that would end up.
Right. And so, I mean, this year you look at it and 16.5 dead million getting out from, what he's owed of 46 million. That's the thing. I guess this is a great place to talk about this, Jess. They really did not structure this contract well, did they? Like, they have some outs for themselves where they took all the dead money early. But his cap hit of $23.6 million the next in 27 and 28 is just so big for a. I mean, is he even a top 20 pass rusher in the NFL? I know sack wise he was, but like, is that even top 20? And then you add on to the fact that they did put void years in there, and they kicked $5.5 million down the road that in 2029
They have to take no matter what.
They can trade, they can cut, they can do it. So like this was a really odd contract because one of the things that we had kind of really complimented Monty Austinford on was not doing the dead money thing. And so what's the common denominator there, Jess? Like Monty didn't like dead money, but now he's doing dead money. I mean, it's almost like the owner needs to spread out how much he's paying these guys, right?
Yeah, it was an interesting move with the. It's very interesting because they had the cap. They had the cap space.
That's what I don't understand.
They could have just paid him. They could have included there's a paying. They're paying him $17 million cash this year. They're paying $17 million cash next year. They could have just included that and made it a $17 million salary and then take the hit this year. And that way they would have been adding $7.2 million to their cap this year as opposed to pushing 5.5 over the next 3 years.
3 years. And that's what again, that's just what I cannot comprehend. Jess, I can't like they're so far under the cap the last 2 years.
There is one thing that maybe Sweat wanted money in March, right? Because he got the signing bonus last year in March. He gets the salary. He gets the option bonus in March. But rather than prorating that, you could simply give him a roster bonus that takes the full cap hit this year. But that was an interesting. It was an interesting cap thing that they did for that when it didn't feel like they needed to.
Well, especially again, like it's crazy to me that this offseason where there's so much cap space that what do good teams do in this situation, Jess? Like, what do good managed teams do in this situation? They tend to turn that cash into guarantees right now, right? Like they'll be like, "Oh, we're a little flush. All right, like let's push some of your guarantees or some of that cash up into this year to take pressure off of later years." And that's, I think, what my frustration is with the whole situation is like, one, the talk of even trading him is absurd. And you and I have spelled out why. Like, you literally have nothing on the roster that is a known commodity that you can justify. I mean, there needs to, like you said, there needs to be the look of at least they're trying. Right? Like, you trade Josh Sweat and you go, yeah, they're not even trying. So there's that first, right? The second thing is that they rolled over, I believe it was $14 million. It might have even been more from last offseason. I believe they have like over $30 million still sitting in there this offseason. Like
they will, so they will get a windfall on June 2nd when Kyler's contract officially is terminated.
Yeah. And so it just feels like I don't know, like it would be and you and I understand the way that they prorated this contract out was like, hey, we're going to be really aggressive in 25 and 26 trying to get more guys to make us more competitive. But that's not happening. And so now you're sitting there, you're going, okay, well, yeah, you're going to save some money. You're going to have to eat $16.5 million, but you save 46. So, here or there, whatever. Whereas like you said, you could have pushed that 17 million up the last 2 years and made it make way more sense. And that's just where I struggle with this, because now you're adding on void years. You've got, there's no justification until right around midseason, if you're a miserable team, to even move Josh Sweat. And that's partially because there's no benefit to you from a salary cap standpoint, right? Like the roster construction aside, there's no benefit to you taking on I know you can prorate it, but taking on an additional $31.8 million in dead cap, right? Like it's just a silly thing. But I look at it and I go, I understand what the point is. Like, good teams are going to call and be like, hey, this team's not trying. Who's their best player that's not Trey McBride? Okay, Josh Sweat and Budda Baker. Well, Sweat's probably easier to get, and for the Cardinals, between you and me and the wall, Jess, probably more valuable to trade, right? Probably going to get you a better return than Budda Baker at this stage of his career, and with positional value and all that. So, yeah, it makes sense. But again, it would have to come in season. The other thing is, and I'm looking back, what did Washington get for Montez Sweat? Did they get a first rounder? Oh, second round.
I believe they did.
Yeah, it was a second round pick. Okay, so that's the thing. I think, you and I, but I think most people would agree that Montez Sweat is better than Josh Sweat. He was also younger at the time. So they got this, a second round pick. What are you getting for Josh Sweat?
Maybe a third. Woo! Yeah. Basically, maybe a third.
And that's the thing is, the other game you play is, in this scenario, is that, hey, you know what would really juice up the price of Josh Sweat? Is if a team like Chicago, like Green Bay, like, one of those teams, right, in November, right before the trade deadline, goes, oh, man, we really need a proven pass rusher. What we're gonna that's gonna give us a shot to make a run in the playoffs. Would you give up a second round pick? Do you want to give up a late 50s, early 60th pick for Josh Sweat, who's in a fairly cost controlled contract, for a contender, right? Like, I think the answer is yes. So you look at that and you go, okay, like right now, teams kind of know what they have. Now, there are teams that definitely need a pass rusher. Would you agree? But like the Cardinals being one of them. But
yes,
like,
the Cardinals are one of those teams.
But like, you look at it and you go, oh, okay, like there are teams that need it, but they're not ready. Like, they're kind of in the same boat as the Cardinals, right? Like, do we waste the pick? Like, what do we do? And that's the other thing is you look at that Bears trade and go. I hate to harp on this, but like you look at that Bears trade, right? In 2023 or 2024. Sorry, no, it was 23. I was right. You look at that Bears trade. They made the trade. They weren't exactly good when they made the trade. But they had some foresight. They said, "Oh, okay, this is a guy that we can extend, and then when we get good." I always feel like, and this is the Josh Sweat piece. This is going back years, the Chandler Jones piece, right? It's always a year too late. It always feels like, right? Like the Cardinals needed pass rush help in 2024. And obviously the Eagles on their way to a Super Bowl weren't trading Josh Sweat in 2024. But and so they said, okay, the next step is 2025. So that's when we're going to go get our pass rusher, our edge rusher. You look at the Cardinals, from 2015, it was like they needed that pass rusher, and probably not going to make a difference overall in that game when they get blown out, right? But like next year they go and get they go and get Chandler Jones, and then he does fine, but the team never lives up to it. It always seems like they're a year late in understanding when they need to bring in that help. Whereas a team like the Bears were, I think, 2-7 when they traded for Montez Sweat, and then
we're good, and then that defense was dominant after that, and they were competitive, and yeah.
And so, like, that's something that you look at and you just go, man, that's something. And I know it's tough. It's a difficult thing to kind of have that intuition and see down the line and be like, oh, okay, this is where we're trending towards. But at the same time, that's what the good teams do. And so the Cardinals have, unfortunately, not been amongst those teams consistently where they're getting those guys or going after those guys in the right time frame.
Yes. Ultimately, what percentage chance do you give Sweat for being on the roster in week 1? For me, I'm going to say 95% certain he's going to be on the roster in week 1. What about you?
100% agree. I would say it's closer to 95% because it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. Like,
what about the end of the season?
I would say it's 50-50. I think it's closer to 50-50 than people want to admit. I definitely think that.
I'll as of today, I'll give it 75% shot that he's on the roster to end the season. But yeah, that can definitely change depending on how this season plays out.
By the way, Jess, I mean, I don't know what your thought is, but like, I also do think it would behoove them to move on from Sweat if they are, in fact, 0 for midway through the season or right around the trade deadline, or even only have 2 wins, right? Because I think the trade deadline's like week 12-ish.
I think it's week 10.
Oh, week 10. So like, yeah, if they're 2-8 or 0-10, God forbid, like, what are you hoping that when you run it back next year that's going to be better? Like that's where I'm just like, hey, that maybe this isn't working. He's been on the roster for 2 years. They've, and I'm not saying defensive end win stats. That's not what I'm saying. But like, you look at it and he's not had the impact that you've hoped for. So like, moving on isn't anything more than just like, hey, it's not working out, right? Like, let's see what another player has in that with that salary and things like that. And that's why I would say it's 50-50, because if they're bad, it kind of makes business sense at that point to move on, get additional picks, and start to kind of load up for the future, as opposed to hanging on to a 30-year-old with 30 or 23 million in salary and a $16.5 million dead cap if you do cut him. So you're only going to save $6.5 million. Like, I would do something. Let's put it this way. I would even change the time frame. Before next year's draft, I would say it's 50-50, because that's when, like, I think they need to move on from him before next year's draft if they're going to do it, because then at that point it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't make business sense when you haven't upgraded the position. Like I almost like they need to have their hand forced of like, okay, we need to add somebody else because Sweat's gone, right?
We would be looking like the Miami Dolphins when they traded everybody, and then they did the offseason. We're like, well, they're going to be bad. Oh, but then they signed a quarterback, and the Cardinals have neither a quarterback nor hope, nor. But it would, it would just be it would be par for the course for this team. It would feel like, but yeah, like right now, there's no reason to trade him. There's no reason to be terribly concerned.
No,
because
and again, it only comes if he's literally like, trade me, like, get rid of me. I don't want to be here, and I'm going to be a problem. It'd be different if it was Gannon, and you're kind of in that year 4, and you're like, we know it's a lame duck type thing, but like, you can't have that hanging over your new coach. That would be the only thing I would say about it.
Yeah, and we haven't had any inclinations that is the case. So we're likely just talking about a veteran enjoying his offseason, and he'll be there for mini camp, won't get that many reps. He'll be there for training camp. He won't get many reps, and then he'll play during the season, just like last offseason, and it'll be fine. He'll get 8 to 11 sacks, and yeah, it'll be fine for him, and the team will be bad, but yes, more offseason talk. At least it's something that we can talk about, because talking about Jacoby Brissett week after week, like I've already said, Jacoby Brissett, he's the least interesting starting quarterback in the NFL right now. So if you're having to talk about him, it ain't that interesting. Yeah, so with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Here podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. We'll be back again soon with more off-season content. Until then, that's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening as always. We'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be red, see red, and of course, rise up, see red.